this on? Yeah. Notice of this public hearing were sent to all main media outlets, all senators and stakeholders 5 days in advance on November 10, and a second notice was sent on November 15. I'd like to recognize Senator Frank Aguon Jr. For being here, as well as Senator Tony Ada. We have just 2 items on the agenda. And the first is the appointment of John T. Calvo to be a member of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority Board of Commissioners for a length of 5 years. Then we have Bill number 396, sponsored by Senator Frank Aguon Jr., an act to add certain sections of the code relative to establishing a solid waste lifeline rate program and to providing a continuing appropriation for the same from recycling revolving fund revenues. We'll start with the confirmation hearing, and also like to thank Senator Morrison for being here as well. So we'll begin by asking Mr. Johnny Sablan, Mr. Joseph Santos to please come forward. Before you gentlemen give your testimony, I just want to, for the benefit of the members here as well as those following on, you may sit down, yeah, following on television, is that Mr. Calvo is off island, but I went ahead and scheduled the confirmation hearing knowing that we just have very few weeks left in this term, and his role in the HRRA is very critical. I serve with him on the Hagåtña Restoration Redevelopment Authority, and so I can provide some personal testimony as well. And the fact that he's not here does not mean that we cannot move forward with this confirmation hearing. If senators, if you have questions of the nominees yourself, or if there's any questions from the public, they can always submit those questions to me, and then we'll work with the nominee to address it. But the fact that he's not here does not mean that he's not committed, or does not mean that he's not interested. It's just a schedule conflict. So who wishes to begin?
Zusmasi, Honorable Senator Rory Respicio, Senator Aguon, Senator Ada, and Senator, my friend Tommy. Thank you. I'm here to, as DCA President, and also as based on the reorganization as the Executive Director of HRRA, the Hagåtña Restoration and Revitalization Authority. So I'm here for reconfirmation testimony on John T. Calvo as a member of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority Board of Commissioners. Saludad on Hafadate, Chairman and Committee Members on Rules, Federal, Foreign and Micronesian Affairs, Human and Natural Resources, Election Reform, and Capital District. As a newly appointed Executive Director of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority, I wholeheartedly support the reconfirmation of Mr. John T. Calvo to the HRRA Board of Commissioners. I am impressed with the efforts that this board continues to support, collaborate, champion, and promote. Upon review of all the work and efforts conducted by the HRRA Board of Commissioners, I am confident that with Mr. Calvo's continued membership and leadership, that our city of Hagåtña would be restored and redeveloped to its former splendor, and a testimony to the resilience of our Chamorro people. Zusmasi.
Zusmasi. Zenon?
Good morning. My name is Xenon Bellinger. I'm the Vice Chair for the HRRA. And I'm here in support of John T. Calvo. He has led us in a good fashion in terms of making sure that we're all on board, and also keeping the all the other factors and moving along, working with all the government agencies and our consultant that's doing the master planning. So I'm here to support that cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
I have a draft testimony here that from John T. Calvo. We're just waiting for his signature on the. So may I go ahead and
Yes,
read
please,
it?
yeah.
Thank you. Honorable Senator Rory Respicio, Chairperson, Committee on Rules, Federal and Foreign and Micronesian Affairs, Human and Natural Resources, Election Reform and Capital District. Buenas Zanhafide, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Due to an immediate concern with my Guam business enterprise, I am currently off island on East Timor resolving an issue that requires my personal attention. Therefore, I apologize but provide this written testimony on my behalf. Over 5 years ago, I was appointed and confirmed to the HRRA Board of Commissioners as a member and subsequently as chairman of the board. Upon review of what was required for the restoration and redevelopment of the city of Hagåtña, the outstanding tasks were formidable and daunting but not insurmountable. During my tenure, we worked towards ensuring a full 7-member HRRA Board of Commissioners was available for quorum to address the requisite tasks of completing and providing a Hagåtña master plan along with its regulatory components. This required a review by the Attorney General on the validity of the previous Hagåtña master plan contract. However, the contract was considered terminated due to lack of previous HRRA board action. Nevertheless, the HRRA Board of Commissioners continued working towards the end state of providing a feasible and sustainable Hagåtña master plan without encumbering the government's general fund. Provided are some of the successes that the HRRA Board of Commissioners have collaborated while working towards the HRRA vision of a vibrant Hagåtña as the center of cultural, civic, political, sports, and economic vitality for Guam and the Western Pacific. A memorandum of agreement between HRRA and GITA to fund the Hagåtña master plan and its subsequent components. Contracting to complete the Hagåtña master plan with Matrix Design Group Incorporated. Engaging the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on hydrology actions that includes the Hagåtña River and the Hagåtña Bay coastal shoreline area. Collaboration on the indispensable inclusion of the mayor of Hagåtña and Legislaturan Guahan representative to become a part of the HRRA Board of Commissioners. Collaboration on the development and completion of the Guam Museum. Collaboration on the removal of the old DOA building. Collaboration on the revitalization of the Paseo de Susana area, including the Tomorrow Village expansion, the Paseo viewing platform, the Paseo Recreation Center renovation. Collaboration on the Tomorrow Village Skinner Plaza pedestrian crosswalk installation. Direction and guidance to the HRRA contractor, Matrix Design Group Incorporated. This includes approved but not implemented projects and providing focus Hagåtña development districts to ensure that Hagåtña would continue to develop as a Guam micro-destination for place-based heritage attractions through historical event, place, period tourism, development of historic cultural corridors, and the restoration and maintenance of Hagåtña historical and cultural sites. However, there are still projects pending. These are pending projects, the following. Continued engagement with the ACOE on hydrology actions to stimulate economic development and growth by channeling the Hagåtña River and providing coastal shoreline protection measures. 2. Complete the Hagåtña master plan along with the zoning code and standards of development regulation and the supporting implementation and sustainability plans. 3. Prepare for and implement the 4 district of economic development plans for Hagåtña City Center District. Hagåtña Riverwalk District, Hagåtña Bay Waterfront District, and the West Hagåtña Residential District. 5. Settle HRRA's dedicated funding source. And finally, finance the HRRA comprehensive economic development strategy projects that would facilitate and stimulate economic development and growth of the city. As the chairman of the HRRA Board of Commissioners, a native of Guam and a business entrepreneur, I request that the Legislatura en Guahan confirm my reappointment to the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority. The city of Hagåtña is the heart and soul of the Chamorro people, a touchstone for Guam and the political center of our island. Helping restore, revitalize, and redevelop Guam's heart and soul will be an honor to continue to be a part of this effort. The HRRA Executive Director, Mr. Johnny G. Sablan, and our HRRA Senior Planner, Joseph C. Santos, can speak on my behalf should you have questions, comments, or concerns. Sinceramente, John T. Calvo.
Okay, thank you again for reading Mr. Calvo's testimony. Just make sure that that's submitted for purposes of the committee report. Joe, do you have anything else to add?
I'm for him. In support, definitely in support.
Okay, I'd like to recognize Senator Mary Torres and thank her for being here as well. Good morning. Okay, Senators, do you have any questions? Okay, before I dismiss the panel, I want to take the liberty to really congratulate the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority. Everything that was enumerated in Chairman Calvo's testimony really reflects all the work that's been done over the last 5 years. In particular, some say that all this redevelopment in Hagåtña is because FESPAC was the impetus to making that thing done, and really it was. But more importantly, through the strong leadership of Mr. Calvo and others on the board, Mr. Bellinger, nothing happened in Hagåtña without HRRA's direction, whether it was the construction of those huts or whether it was the crosswalk. There was just a lot of coordination to make sure that whatever developments were made in Hagåtña, whether it's the restoration of the museum or the restoration of the Guam Congress building, everything was done in concert with the plan. And so I wanted to state that for the record, so it wasn't the hops, just pieces of things being put together for the sake of having things being put together, but it was all getting us toward that goal of fully implementing the Hagåtña redevelopment and master plan. So I'm going to again take the liberty to declare that his nomination has been publicly heard in the interest of being reasonable and moving this confirmation process forward. If senators have any questions, like I said, or if any member of the public has any questions regarding this nominee, I'll certainly entertain it and work with the nominee to get those answers. But at this point, this confirmation has been publicly heard, and I congratulate and thank Mr. Calvo for accepting the reappointment. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Bill 396, and it's relative to establishing a solid waste lifeline rate program and to providing a continuing appropriation for the same from the Recycling Revolving Fund revenues. And so I'd like to recognize the sponsor of this bill, Senator Aguon, to give an overview.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank you for conducting the public hearing on this particular piece of legislation. When you take a look at just the title itself, relative to establishing a solid waste lifeline rate program and to providing a continuing appropriation for the same from the Recycling Revolving Fund revenues, that's the intent behind it. If you take a look at the history behind the use of or access of our people of the 96-gallon trash bin, when that was initially rolled out by the receiver, in that case, prior to that implementation, we had approximately 20,000 homes that were receiving direct services from the Guam Solid Waste Authority. Shortly after the implementation of this and with the increase in the rates of the bins from $10, trash collection requirement from $10 to $30, it resulted in a drop of about 2,000 households from the number of households that was previously receiving services from the Guam Solid Waste Authority. And the question lingered in terms of how can we get those 2,000 homes to get back into the system of having their trash received by the Guam Solid Waste Authority and disposing it properly over the Luzon landfill. And that's the intent behind this particular proposal, Mr. Chairman, is to ensure that a program, a lifeline rate is established so that those who are either middle class, based on the different income levels that is proposed in this particular legislation, or those who are in the lower echelon of the economic tier, that at least they're given an opportunity to be able to access a trash bin and a recycle bin from the Guam Solid Waste Authority. The more households we have utilizing the program and receiving services from the Guam Solid Waste Authority is certainly going to be beneficial to the community, rather than having to drive by certain roadways and see trash along the roadside. There's also, Mr. Chairman, some additional information I'd like to share with members of the committee and also the public, that if you take a look at the overall collections for the recycling revolving fund, since the establishment through Public Law 28-171, there has been approximately $22 million that has been generated from that fund since its initial establishment through the payment of vehicle registration. Also, as we look at this, the actual collections per year, in 2008, the revolving fund collected $1.2 million. In 2009, it collected $2.3. In 2010, the revolving fund collected $2.4 million. And then on with the additional years, fiscal year 2011, $2.4 million. Fiscal year 2012, $2.6 million. Fiscal year 2013, $2.6 million. Fiscal year 14, $2.6 million. And fiscal year 15, $2.7 million. And the initial draft number for fiscal year 16 is approximately $2.8 million. I highlight that, Mr. Chairman, because in addition to the collections through the vehicle registration of approximately $22 million since the establishment of this revolving fund, there has been transfers out of this particular fund. In fiscal year 15, fiscal year 10, there was approximately $5 million that was taken out of this revolving recycling fund, out of that particular fund, and transferred outside of that particular use. Also in fiscal year 11, that dropped to $175,000 that was transferred out of the recycling fund, which could otherwise be utilized for the programs that is outlined in that particular legislation. Fiscal year 2012, $2.1 million was transferred out of that fund. And fiscal year 2013, it dipped slightly to $770,000 that was transferred out of the fund, which could otherwise have been utilized, like I shared a little earlier, for purposes that is outlined for that particular fund. Fiscal year 14, $3 million was transferred out of that fund. And in fiscal year 15, $2 million was transferred out of that fund. For what use? I do not have the specific use, but it was outside the realm of what these funds are actually collected for and utilized for. And if you take a look at this legislation, I understand, Mr. Chairman, that I'm a little bit long on this, but we need to understand, and our people also need to know, that this is a recycling revolving fund that every single vehicle owner, when they register their vehicle, they pay anywhere from $25 to $30 for the registration of the vehicle. This recycling fund now is supposed to be utilized for recycling purposes. Obviously, there's a lot of activity that has taken place in the last 2 months. I went with some of my team members to a small pocket neighborhood where, in fact, there were a lot of kids playing in the streets. There were literally 8 to 10 abandoned vehicles, all broken apart, doors were taken off, all rotting away. Abandoned vehicles in that small pocket village, which the roadway, by the way, is paved all the way into those households in there. When you have 8 to 10 abandoned vehicles in which parts were taken apart, with the trunk, the cover of the trunk, you have the doors taken apart, it's rotting away, that is a safety issue. That is a health issue for our children. And to have seen anywhere, I believe there were about 8 or 10 children. When I walked that particular street with my team members, that I think is really highlights the need to ensure that we clean up our community, that we use this recycling fund for this specified purpose of getting rid of abandoned vehicles, and also ensuring that our people are able to participate in the service that's being provided by the Guam Solid Waste Authority so that they can have trash bins, dispose of their trash, their household trash in those bins, and be direct participants of this program so that we can actually have the trash disposed over at the Ladzone landfill. That's the purpose behind it. So there's two thoughts here. One is making sure that we can establish a lifeline program for our family members who, for whatever reason, may not be able to afford the fee of $30 at this point in time, and I know there's a lot of discussion about increasing that fee upwards. This proposal would allocate out of the recycling revolving fund approximately $750,000. That would subsidize some of these households so that they can directly participate in the trash collection administered by the Guam Solid Waste Authority and the receiver. So, Mr. Chairman, I certainly hope that we do receive favorable testimony with regards to this proposal, because the intent is to increase participation and to help additionally clean up our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Aguon, for your summary of the Recycling Revolving Fund. And again, we're waiting on the public auditor to submit her audit findings on how much was transferred out of the fund and for what purposes those funds were used. This is why we recently passed a law that provided for the $30 per ton stimulus package, so that $1.4 million of this fund being generated can be already allocated toward recycling efforts, barring the Environmental Protection Agency submission of the rules and regulations, which would really, tie up how these monies are not only collected, but also how they're spent, and prevent these kinds of transfers out.
One more comment, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, just to close this. I know you mentioned the public auditor, but these figures originated from the audited financial statements of the Recycling Revolving Fund.
Yeah, she's committed to auditing where this money went. She just highlighted what the transfers out were, but she's going to go a step further and provide for us and for the community where these monies actually went.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There's 4 people that signed up to testify on this bill, so I'll call all of them up at once. Mr. Gale, Mr. Palacios, Mr. Denied, and Mr. Perron. And then we can go in the order that that you folks signed up, or whoever wishes to proceed. Let me start with Andrew Gale.
Good morning, Senators. Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, I'm here testifying in my capacity as a member of the board of the Guam Solid Waste Authority. And I would like to thank Senator Aguon for that education, that explanation. I was a little ignorant of some of the facts. I've only been involved with public service since 2013 with my appointment of the board, so I really wasn't privy to any of the legislative intent behind the original recycling fund. And so I prepared testimony just based solely on what I read in your bill. I am not against Lifeline per se. However, in my role as a member of the board, I am always concerned about what impacts there may be as this legislation may have to whatever the finances of the Solid Waste Authority could be. And so I just have a few points. I'll submit my written testimony, but just a few points to highlight. When I just read the bill on its face. First of all, there's a part that says the program will be administered by the GEPA or the GSWA. The "or" in there is just ambiguous for me. Whenever I see an "or" in anything, it's always difficult to determine legislative intent. So my recommendation is that the Solid Waste Authority would administer the program, would determine who's eligible and who's not eligible based on the rules established, and would make sure that the rates are correct, make sure that the eligibility requirements are met, make sure that any eligibility records that would need to be audited at a future point are kept. And then maybe perhaps a third party, and I suggest maybe a third party would be, since the existing law says the GEPA has gets all of the revenue from the recycling fund. Maybe that third party is the reimbursing entity. In other words, GTA is also a. I also work at GTA, Guam Telephone Authority, or former Guam Telephone Authority. We administer a lifeline program as well. It's a federally funded lifeline program for households that meet certain requirements, and those certain requirements are established by if you're a member, if you're eligible, if you get SNAP, if you're eligible for certain social programs, federal social programs, then you're eligible for this lifeline program. GTA administers it. We are required to publicize the availability of such lifeline programs with the various agencies that would administer other aspects of those types of social programs. And then we subsidize the bill. So instead of billing someone $15, we'd bill them $7. And then we take that information and then we submit it for reimbursement from the government, from the federal government. We say, look, these customers got this particular subsidy, and we're submitting for reimbursement, and then they would reimburse us. So it's designed to be revenue neutral. We're providing the exact same service as the next person. They're paying the same money because, again, as a utility, we have certain costs. We are regulated by certain the public utility agency for our rates. So we have to be able to make sure that the rates that we charge are in line with our costs. So that's one suggestion. The other suggestion I would make is, and I suppose that was in there, I would be a little uncomfortable with anybody outside of the Department of Revenue and Taxation having copies of anybody's taxes, right? So the bill says you can provide a copy of your tax form or some other form. I would suggest that there would be if we were to implement this, part of the rules is you would just, the GSW would develop a form and say, tier A, tier B, tier C, tier 1, 2, 3, and go have it stamped at Revenue and Tax that just says you fall within this tier. Some form of authentication that doesn't require someone from outside the Revenue and Tax to have a copy of someone's tax forms. I just was uncomfortable with that. So the tiers were established. I assume that there is a formula for how those tiers were established. Tier A, tier B, tier B, C. But there didn't seem to be a mechanism in the bill to adjust the tiers in the future. So if something happens 5 years from now, if those numbers change, they're just, I don't know if there's some other language in the bill that allows for that or not. I'm just ignorant of that. But that's another feedback. Also, the rates, it was unclear to me when I read the bill how the rates were established. You have $20, $15, and $10. And there's, again, doesn't seem to be a mechanism to adjust those in the future. Perhaps if the overall rate goes up, what happens to the subsidy? Or if the overall rate goes down, what happens to those tier rates? So if we establish at a base rate of $30 today, but tomorrow or at some point in the future, if it goes to 32 or if it drops to 28, what happens to tier 1, 2, and 3? It's just not clear. It's not mentioned in the bill. Also, there's a host community fee currently today. So you pay $30, but then the legislature established a host community fee, and it's a surcharge. And the surcharge goes to, part of it goes to Inarajan for hosting LADZone, and part of it goes to ORDOT, Chalampago ORDOT for the current ORDOT dump. The bill doesn't make any mention of what happens to those surcharges for Lifeline customers. Are the Lifeline customers required to pay any current or future surcharges or not? It's just silent on that. So again, I'm always for making things as clear as possible so legislative intent is followed. I was ignorant of how much money was going into the recycling fund, and so my concern is that if $750,000 is appropriated for the reimbursement of this Lifeline rates, of these subsidized rates, my concern is that's a fixed amount that's been appropriated for a variable cost. And the reason I say it's variable is you have to establish eligibility. So a customer, a GSWA customer, at least the way I interpret this bill, would have to come in and say, we could say, hey, first of all, the Solid Waste Authority would have to, in my opinion, would need to admit, if they're administering the program, would have to publicize the program. It would be part of the rules would say, look, as a recipient of these reimbursed funds, you have to go out and inform the customers, subscribers of this program at various locations, whether it's Department of Public Health and Social Services or wherever. And then that customer would have to take it upon himself to get certified. And then once they get certified, then they could get the rate. Now, that impact is variable as because if it's an annual certification, then they have to do it annually. So this is again, GTA is familiar with these. Our rate, our subsidized customers fluctuates just based on who has been able to submit their qualifications or not. So my major concern there is we have a fixed amount on a possibly variable subsidy. So my concern as a member of the board would be that if I would want to ensure, particularly at this point where we're in receivership and in the process of coming out of receivership, that the Lifeline program would somehow be revenue neutral, that it would not impact our ability to operate, it would not impact our ability to justify rates to the Public Utilities Commissions, that it would be considered a revenue neutral program. And like I said, as we migrate out of receivership and into our autonomous agency, we would have to have anytime we would want to do a rate up or down, we'd have to justify that through the Public Utilities Commission. So again, in my opinion, a revenue neutral impact would help make sure that those rates could be justified without a variable condition. And just as an example of this variability, I did which I will submit. I did a quick, simple analysis of the households in Guam based on household income. I just looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There was a 2010 census that broke down all the households in Guam and what their incomes were. And while there are 44,000 households in Guam, but only 18,000 subscribers, I had to make some assumptions. So I came up with the percentage breakdown based on the tiers. What percentage of households fall under Tier 1, what percentage of households fall under Tier 2, what percentage of households fall under Tier 3. And I just applied those percentages to the 18,000 customers. You can make an argument that that's not accurate, but it's the only information that I could deal with. So based on that, there would be approximately 27% of the households in Guam would fall under the lowest tier. That would be Tier 3, which would be from, what did you have tier? In your bill you had tier was below 17,000. So I estimated about 27%. And then I estimated about 11.7% would fall into the next tier from 27,000 to 39,000. And then I estimated, actually I put it wrong here. Then I estimated about 21.5% would fall in the other in the third tier and then the next tier up, and then the rest would not be eligible for a subsidy. And based on that, you come up with about 42% of our subscribers would not be eligible for a subsidy. Thus, 58% of households could be eligible for some form of subsidy, which is a pretty high percentage.
Mr. Gale, can I just clarify, when you talk about households, are you talking about people who are presumed to have single structures with trash receptacles? Because there's also apartment complexes that I think would... How do you
That's a good point.
that?
That's a good point, Senator. Right, so the Bureau of Labor Statistics categorizes all households, which is 44,000 households, which could be apartments, could be multiple dwelling units, condominiums. those particular households would not be customers of the GSWA. So GSWA has 18,000 customers, which are presumed mainly to be single-family dwellings that would be eligible to have carts. Could be as 4-unit apartments. 4-unit apartments and below could also have these carts. Right, but so there's a difference between that 18,000 and the 44,000. So I had to make an assumption to try to do a financial analysis. I made an assumption, and I just transferred the percentages. I took the percentages of the 44,000 together, and then I just transferred it. And it's a straight line assumption. You can make an argument that more research could be done, but it was the simple, with the data I had, I just made that assumption. And again, it's just an assumption. So again, based on that assumption, I came up with 25% would fall into Tier 3, 13% would fall into Tier 2, 20% would fall into Tier 1, and 42% would be non-lifeline. Now, if 100% of those customers that were eligible for any of the tiers, whether it's Tier 3, Tier 2, or Tier 1, if we had a 100% take rate, which we probably won't get, but if you did have a 100% take rate, the possible impact, the financial impact to the revenue of the Solid Waste Authority would be about $1.9 million. So there's my issue, is we have a $750,000 appropriation, and the best case or worst case scenario, however you want to look at it, of 1.9 million based on today's. And again, there's certain assumptions here. Now, you could argue that the intent was to increase the number of customers by making it more affordable. There would be you could take up, say we had 2,000 more customers now because it's more affordable. There would be that issue. So again, that's what concerns me as a member of the board, is that variable subsidy amount against a fixed appropriation. I don't know how to fix. But one of my suggestions to fix that is, again, you would have one agency be reimbursing the Solid Waste Authority for its actual subsidies, and not against a flat rate subsidy, right? Again, I will submit this for your information. Perhaps some of my assumptions were incorrect or too conservative. However, I just feel that I myself, I'm not against lifelines in particular. I am just concerned about the impact to the Solid Waste Authority, what those impacts may be, and how we are going to make sure that we're successful in transferring out of receivership into a fully functioning autonomous agency.
Just a quick response, if I may, Mr. Chairman, in regards to just a couple of your questions. First of all, the Recycling Revolving Fund is presently being administered out of Guam Environmental Protection Agency. Once the receivership releases the services back to Guam Solid Waste Authority, then it will transition over to the Guam Solid Waste Authority. Now, in terms of looking at your numbers, to me, the reality is increasing the participation of our community in utilizing Guam Solid Waste Authority's trash collection service is going to be a lot more beneficial, whether it's 1,500 homes, whether it's 2,000 homes, because we know that even since 2010, or when this program was initiated, the carts were initiated, that there's been significant number of single residential homes that have been constructed since then. So even if we're looking at that and we get these individuals and these family members to directly participate and have the trash deposited in the appropriate location, which is Aguon landfill, then to me, it's cleaning up our community. And that is really driving it home in terms of assisting some of our families who at this point in time are not able to afford the fee, regardless as to what it is, and then allow them to benefit in terms of disposing the trash where it should be disposed and perhaps not elsewhere. So I appreciate some of your comments. I will take that into consideration in terms of the tiers adjustment. First of all, the income level was taken from the federal income standard that is adopted by the Guam Housing, the GURA entity. So it's originating from that, establishing those tiers, making sure that we get more families to directly participate in this program and dispose of trash where they really rightfully should go. And I appreciate a lot of your input.
So again, I did not know that just from reading the bill. I didn't know that they were adapted from those. So perhaps you could tie it, link it. link the tiers to, so that if the federal government of GUR changes its rules, then the tiers are adjusted automatically. And you won't have to worry about it 5-10 years from now from adjusting your tiers if they're adjusted. That's kind of how, again, with the Lifeline program that's administered at GTA, we don't establish who's eligible. That eligibility is established elsewhere. And then we just administer of those who are eligible.
Ultimately, this program would be administered out of the Guam Solid Waste Authority. So in terms of trying to retain as many households to participate in the services that are being provided, whether it's 4 years, 5 years down the road, maintaining present participation, increasing the number of households participating, and any additional households, it's only going to benefit the entire service that is being provided. So I understand some of your concerns. We will continue to take a look at it, and maybe a 5-year revisit of the tier, but I am not in support of a rate adjustment based on the Lifeline proposal, because the idea here, the underlying concern, is to get more households on board.
No, that's not my point at all,
Yeah.
by the way. My point is, our John and also, our fiduciary responsibility as board members is to make sure that the Solid Waste Authority can stand on its own. It can function. It can fulfill its legislative mandate, which is to collect trash and to manage the LADS and landfill, and to make sure their cap is there. We don't necessarily have the legislative mandate in our enabling act that says we need to ensure that the island is clean. Right? We're not an enforcement agency, and so our primary goal is to make sure that the rates established and the revenues collected will make sure that we can fulfill the primary goal.
No, I understand.
Okay.
It's just
Right.
you're looking at Guam Solid Waste Authorities, the responsibilities,
Right.
making sure you generate sufficient revenues to provide the service. We're looking at it from this perspective of keeping our island clean.
Right.
Finding mechanisms and creating mechanisms so that, in fact, we can continue to work on recycling and keeping our island clean.
Which I agree
I
100%. And if that's why I'm suggesting that that we would administer a program that some third party reimburses the Solid Waste Authority, and don't give the money. Well, again, it's my opinion. If you just give the money to the Solid Waste Authority and it gets intermingled into its revenues, then when it comes to rate establishment of rates, and going to the PUC to justify your rates, it might get a little more confusing. If you establish rates based on your costs and then your subsidy program is separate from that, then there's no confusion.
And that's exactly what the receiver did when the Recycling Revolving Fund was transferred over to the Department of Public Works. The receiver took the $2 million annual fee, and he said that as a result, the tipping fee was going to be reduced significantly, because he thought that this Recycling Revolving Fund would have been a $2 million subsidy for trash pickup. And we moved very quickly as the legislature at that time to take this Recycling Revolving Fund and put it back at the Environmental Protection Agency, because, while I agree with the intent of this program, I don't really agree that the Recycling Revolving Fund should be the funding source. I mean, people are paying for their vehicle registration so that you can support recycling initiatives separate and apart from solid waste collection, and ultimately it's solid waste diversion out of the landfill. And I know your concern is that if you have a mandate to provide a lifeline rate with a $750,000 appropriation, this is fluid. This is a moving target. So at some point, the Guam Solid Waste Authority is going to be stuck with a bill.
Right.
Because you're providing the services, someone has to pay. EPA is going to say, well, we only have $750,000. So I know everything is a moving target, and I really support the intent of this. I know it's easy to wrap anyone's mind around the fact that recycling means trash diversion out of the landfill, but recycling in and of itself is not trash going into the landfill, because not everything can be recycled.
True.
And so from the whole genesis of this creation of the Recycling Revolving Fund was to focus on recycling activity. And when we saw that the receiver was using this money to buy Packer trucks, was using this money to buy uniforms, using this money to show the federal judge that he's renovating some portions of public works to support solid waste activity. This was a concern for us in the legislature, and it was a concern for the community, from the Recycling Association, from recyclers, that this was not the intent of the Recycling Revolving Fund. And I mean, I'm going to continue to keep an open mind. We're having a hearing. We're going to flush this thing out. We're going to discuss it so that it becomes everything is going to be put on the table to really make sure that this is how we want to use the Recycling Revolving Fund, that ultimately it could just 100% of the Recycling Revolving Fund can go to subsidize the tipping fees, because we're not so sure how much really it's going to cost. We're not so sure that if we, those 44,000 households you identified, maybe some apartment owners might say, well, I'm using private trash pickup. Now that there's a subsidy and I have low-income families in my units, I'm going to go to trash bins. So,
Thank you.
I mean, yeah.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak regarding this bill, and again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Tonight, do you want to add anything else? Okay, I'll recognize you, and then we'll go over to the other side.
Okay. Good morning, Senators, Mr. Chair. Basically, I have no opposition to a lifeline rate. I understand the need and do agree with the intent. But like our chair, I also agree that there are some concerns, and he stated all the same concerns that I do have. I think, establishing eligibility, really knowing the numbers, the cost, and so forth. If the recycling fund has the revenue that can cover the amount that we're talking about, and there is no impact on solid waste revenue, that would be the way to go. One suggestion that I do have is that maybe in the legislation you could include that the Solid Waste Board will go to the PUC to establish these rates and so forth, because that's the purpose of the PUC. So that would be my one recommendation, is that, in the legislation it's set up so that the Guam Solid Waste Authority Board works with the PUC to establish these rates, the tiers, and so forth, and move forward in that way. Again, just mirroring what our chair said. Basically, our concern is, we're still in receivership until the end of next year. We really, as a board, we have no access to funds, so it's not like we could cover any shortfalls if there were any. We do not have access to those funds. So the main concern is as board members of the Guam Solid Waste Authority, that this does not have a negative impact on revenues for the Solid Waste Authority, which right now cannot be covered by the board at all. So I think my one recommendation would be that, in addition to everything said by Mr. Gale, Chairman Gale, is that you consider letting the Solid Waste Board work this through the PUC to establish these rates.
Okay.
And thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go down the line. Mr. Perron, wait.
Sorry, I have a meeting at 10,
Okay,
if I may.
okay.
Okay.
But there might be some questions though, so.
I have a meeting at
Yeah.
10.
So if we have questions, I'll just have to send you a letter.
You can do that. I'm here as a private citizen of
Okay.
Guam, as a resident of Manila.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm here to state that I do support the creation of a lifeline rate, and with past professional experience in the field of solid waste management, especially as it relates to illegal dumping. I think this is something that our community needs. Mr. Gale earlier brought up some very impressive statistics based on many assumptions, as he so declared. I would venture to say that the 42% of households that he noted would likely not qualify for any of these tiers, probably represent 70% of the 18,000 households. And I think that would be a fair assumption at this point. So I think that the opportunity for more people, not just to become solid waste customers again, is high. But in addition, I think it would attract brand new customers that have never been part of the program. And I'm not saying that people who aren't on the program are the ones who are illegally dumping all around our island. What I'm saying is, I think that any effort to curb illegal dumping should be welcome in whatever way, shape, or form, and regardless of who pushes the measure forward. And so, I do support the intent. I like the creation of a lifeline rate. And if we need to have further discussion on this matter, I think that's welcome as well. I think it would be great for more community inclusion. For whatever reason, many people who I imagine would like to be here aren't able to make it. Maybe they're at work, they can't sign leave, whatever the case may be. But I do, as a resident of Mangilao, as a citizen of Guam, I ran a failed senatorial bid, but one of the things that I advocated for was solid waste management and really tackling the issue of illegal dumping. And so that wasn't a campaign promise, it wasn't a campaign pitch. It's something that I will continue to push for as a private citizen.
Okay, before you have to leave, Mr. Palacios, I just want to get your thoughts on the other component of the bill. Given your former administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, how do you feel about the use of the Recycling Revolving Fund to fund the lifeline rate?
I think the fact that we are giving reprieve to private businesses is all the more reason why we should help private citizens.
But the funding source. I'm talking about the funding source in particular.
Again, through the stimulus law, we are giving financial assistance to companies. It only makes sense that we use the same funding source to give assistance to private citizens. It's that simple. That's my position on it.
And I guess with all the millions of dollars that was transferred out, it makes it hard to argue to preserve the true intent of the Recycling Revolving Fund. The problem I have is the $12 million that was taken out over the years makes it harder and harder to defend the Recycling Revolving Fund and the spirit of that fund. So I think my thoughts are evolving to what you just said too.
Right, and as a former employee at Guam EPA, I cannot speak to all the monies that were transferred out before my tenure. I wish I could, but I can't. And that's what I have to say about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for your participation. Okay, Mr. Perron.
Oh, sure. John,
Okay.
Yeah, just one more thing before we start. Yes, Senator Torres brought up a good point, which is, all this discussion is on the residential customers for solid waste, the 17,000 some customers that pay $30 a month. But, there may be many people eligible for this program that are living possibly in multifamily settings that are serviced by private companies that pick up their solid waste. So how would that affect this bill? In other words, they're not direct customers of the Solid Waste Authority, which picks up residential trash, but they are solid waste customers through a third-party private contractor.
Just in response to that, I think that, well, first of all, the businesses already have established commercial rates in terms of receiving services through either the receiver or the Guam Solid Waste Authority, so those rates will continue. And in this particular case, it's applicable to residents, individualized residents or others that could apply and receive direct services from the Guam Solid Waste Authority. So, I mean, it's to me, I understand where you're coming from in terms of trying to provide the lifeline rate to some other families, but if already apartment unit, 12-unit apartment unit, or 12 unit apartment is already utilizing the commercial rate, then I don't think that it's applied towards $30 for every single, I don't know how the rates are established, and that's where the PUC would come in.
Okay.
So I don't want to mix the two, and in fact, the focus here is on individualized, eligible households.
Sure. Single-family dwellings primarily. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perron.
Okay. Good morning, Senators. My name is Bob Perrin, and I'm here in my capacity as president of Guahan Waste Control, a local commercial solid waste company. I'm not here in my capacity as Guam EPA chair. The agency will be submitting testimony on behalf of the agency, so I'm just speaking as a solid waste professional and as a citizen as well. Anyway, I stand in support of the idea of a lifeline rate for lower income solid waste customers. With the relatively low wage scales on Guam, some people have elected to not receive solid waste services from GSWA due to the high cost. This has led to significant amounts of illegal dumping on Guam. I would recommend, and I believe that a roundtable should be convened that will include all the appropriate government agencies and the public, along with, the committee. What needs to be determined is the amount and source of the money available to provide the subsidy, the mechanism to determine eligibility for the program, and the managing of the program on an ongoing basis. And I also believe that the PUC should be engaged to help promulgate these rates pursuant to Public Law 28-56, which enumerates their role in rate setting, and which includes a provision for lifeline rates. So it is in Public Law 28-56. But of course, you could submit rates as a legislature to them, and they could be the one to go ahead and inscribe those into the rate structure. But anyway, I do support a lifeline rate for the low-income people. I think it's very important. But a lot of the issues that Mr. Gale brought up are very appropriate and reasonable to look at, and I think that's something a round table could sit and spend an afternoon discussing and trying to come up with solutions. And I'd hope Mr. Gale and Mr. DeKnight would take part in that type of a round table, and I would volunteer to take part and lend any experience that I have towards finding the right mix of rates and how much you're going to subsidize, how many people are going to be covered, what the overall cost is, and if we exceed that cost, how would that be handled? Would that be an additional appropriation to make up the difference, or how that could be looked at and handled so it doesn't negatively affect the Solid Waste Authority's ability to conduct operations, pay for the bond, and do all the other things it has to do. So anyway, that's where I come from. And again, this is my opinion as a solid waste professional and not the position necessarily of Guam EPA. That'll be coming.
And that's unfortunate because I thought that you were going to be here on behalf of EPA. I thought that Eric Palacios was here on behalf of the administration. Any idea why EPA is not here?
They're going to submit written testimony. I know that, but as far as why they weren't able to attend, I'm not sure. I did ask them if they were going to be coming, and they said they were putting together the written testimony to lay out.
You've been involved in the Recycling Revolving Fund for many years, and I'm going to try to force you to put your EPA hat on as the chairman. The intent of the Recycling Revolving Fund was to help promote recycling activities, and it was never intended to subsidize the tipping fees or any of the solid waste activities. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's a whole list of mandates in the Recycling Revolving Law that's required for the use of these funds.
Right. I guess I understand that this legislation would go to modify the Revolving Recycling Fund mission and what it's meant to encompass. So I guess whatever the legislature says the fund is what it's for. If you decide to rename it Revolving Recycling Fund and Lifeline Fund, that would certainly be your prerogative as a legislature. So the fund is whatever you guys want it to be.
No, I know. The laws can be changed, laws can evolve, mandates can be re-identified, and things can be refocused. I just wanted to get EPA's perspective based on the amount of money it's collecting. Is there just available $750,000 based on the annual monies they're collecting to fund this mandate?
Well, I believe there's about $2.8 million that's currently being collected So it's just a matter of priorities.
Yeah, about 1.4 is already for the stimulus package, the $30 per ton.
Right.
And then there's some money's being used for administration of the fund.
Mhm. Yeah, as the law exists now, that funding wouldn't be available. It would need the modification that's anticipated in this law.
And then as Senator Aguon pointed out,
Right.
the abandoned vehicles, the mayors are wanting to tap the fund also to move forward on doing the abandoned vehicles and the collection of tires and
Yeah, correct.
so I mean I'm hoping that EPA will step in and give us an idea of what their projections are and their financial needs for this fund going forward. Otherwise, this whole recycling revolving fund is just going to be used to subsidize the tipping fee.
Yeah, correct. I assume that they'll be addressing that in their written testimony.
So you'll be successful at having people be serviced by the Guam Solid Waste Authority, but where's the success when all of that trash is just going to the La John landfill and then we've lost focus on recycling efforts?
Right.
So there's no balance.
Yeah, I think the way that Senator Aguon's bill is written, it would dedicate the $750 towards this program, and then I believe it leaves open the amount in the subsidy, the $30 stimulus, and then it denotes the rest of the money
I
going
know, but
down.
as Mr. Gale pointed out, that $750,000 number is a moving target.
Yeah, correct. I agree. And
So-
I agree with a lot of what Mr. Gale said.
You know what's interesting is there's a stimulus package that $1.4 million is being dedicated to private businesses to encourage recycling. Even if the call from me is to include 2,000 additional households that would fall under eligibility of this so that they can participate in the service and take that $1.4 million, albeit I'm supportive of recycling, but take that $1.4 million and give it to these households so that they can participate directly and we do no longer have illegal dumping. And so there are options that are available here. I would not, right now at this point in time, we're looking at 750,000, but we still don't know the number of eligible individuals or households under this particular proposal. So it's trying to increase the number of households that directly participate under the service so that the trash can be properly deposited at the Lazon landfill.
I guess this is where we have a philosophical difference here. Sure, we want to increase participation, but you just want all that trash to go to the landfill? I mean, it's a delicate balance, and we'll talk about
There's
this.
$2.8 million. Mr. Chair, I mean, when you just mentioned it, $12 million in the last, 4, 5, 6, 7 years that have been extracted from this recycling fund and used outside of the requirements of this fund, then that's $12 million that could have been utilized for our households out there in the community. And that's what I'm proposing. We need to get more and increased participation in trash collection so that, in fact, the trash can go into the dump, so to speak, rather than on the sides of our streets.
And for the record, I never supported any of those transfers out of the fund. I was the one who called on the public auditor to do an audit of that fund. And so this is why we moved quickly to tie up as much money as possible to support the spirit of the recycling revolving fund. Otherwise, there might be a movement to repeal it altogether. I don't see why people should be paying $25 to register their vehicle when that money is being used for somewhere else.
It's being used to clean this island community, inclusive of recycling.
No, I was talking about the transfers out of the fund. I'm not talking about your bill. I agree with your bill. We just have to figure out how much it's going to cost annually so that the Guam Solid Waste Authority is not going to be stuck with an unfunded mandate. And I think that's what I'm hearing very clearly.
No, but I think, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I think that's very unfair because we still do not even know the numbers. If out of the entire scenario that was shared with us by Mr. Gale, that only, let's say, an additional 1,500 households would be eligible under this particular program, and it would not exceed $1 million, then that's $1 million worth an investment in our private residence and our households so that, in fact, they can participate directly in the disposition of the trash.
But an investment to what? Bring the solid waste to the landfill?
It's an investment to clean this community.
Where's the waste diversion? We can go on forever, but
Can I-
it's just... I'm coming from a recycling perspective, and that's the whole intent of the fund. We're trying to find customers of the fund so we avoid illegal dumping, and I understand that. I just want to be clear how I'm thinking about this issue. We just don't want to go get people to sign up for a program that's going to bring trash to the landfill. That's not what the intent of the Recycling Revolving Fund was about. And just because there's been transfers out of the fund over the years doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, but then in this case, Mr. Chairman, so we're willing to adjust the rates for every single household from $30 to $45, perhaps anticipate a continual reduction in the number of households
I've always said that
participating
this was a
in the
more
program,
expensive,
rather
option.
than moving forward and creating a lifeline program so that we get increased number of households. You get an additional 2,000 to 3,000 households that participate in trash collection out of Guam Solid Waste. You may not even need to increase the rates. I mean, if we talk about the numbers, maybe some of the funding source under the Lifeline program would be sourced out of the recycling fund, but it's only going to enhance the trash collection and the disposition of the trash by our people. So, I mean, it's an argument, it's a discussion that can continue infinitum, but it's about cleaning up our community, allowing more households to participate in the trash services provided by Guam Solid Waste Authority. I understand about the revenue neutral. You're absolutely right. You run a business in the private sector and in the government, it has to be to a great extent revenue neutral, but I'm looking at increased participation. If we can give $1.4 million to private businesses for recycling efforts, we can give $1.4 million to our residents so that they can participate in the trash collection and allow our government to be able to service them through this process.
Yeah, I think we all really agree with the intent of your bill, Senator. It's just a matter of the details now. You know, let's, if possible, if we could sit down in a roundtable setting with you, your staff, and interested parties and kind of flesh out all these details, we might be able to come up with a package that'll really work and fulfill the intent of your legislation with some tweaks to the way it is laid out right now. So I don't know if that's something that interests you.
Yeah, and
Or maybe
can I add to that? You know, I think Senator Aguon, in your presentation, you were mentioning, I think, that the forecast for the fund is like 2.8, I think, for this year, something
We
like that.
generated actual cash collection draft figures is $2.8 million for
So,
fiscal
I
year
mean,
16.
there's a lot we still don't know, but, you know, who knows? Maybe there's enough to fund this program and have money to really push recycling, you know, to really promote recycling. So, and I think as a board for solid waste, that's one thing that we are definitely looking at, is that there could be more done to promote recycling. I think right now we're at about 30%.
The new numbers just came out. I think we're 28 point.
So
I mean, if this
28% of
went
the
down a
solid
little
waste
bit.
is being,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean,
and there's
for-
some communities that do like 50, 60%.
For
so
me, it's-
we got a big gap.
For me, it's not even the money, it's the objective. And so if the $750,000 or even $1 million is going to be used to fund the recycling bins, then that's easy to understand, because it's to increase the participation for the same objective. You're increasing the participation to have an objective that goes against the objectives of the Recycling Revolving Fund. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels this way. It's harder to communicate this because EPA is not here. And Senator Aguon and I entirely agree with what you're trying to do, but you're trying to increase in our participation for an objective that's different from what the Recycling Revolving Fund is to be used for. You can spend $2.8 million to pay for everybody's recycling bins on this island and I'll be okay, because it's to increase the objective of recycling, not to increase an objective to have solid waste going to the landfill. And that's all I want to say. And
Well, I'm just going
I
to
just
say
say-
that there's just been too many days in the last 60, 90 days where I've walked the streets and there have been illegal
So fund
dumping.
this out of the general fund. So fund this out of some other fund. You're tapping a fund that's supposed to be used entirely.
I'm fine
for-
with tapping a fund as long as it benefits our community and it allows increased participation by additional households so that they can themselves dispose of the trash properly.
10 years from now, when our landfills are filled, then the
Mr. Chairman, we can
recycling
change the
companies
name, like Mr. Perron just mentioned. We can change the name from Recycling Revolving Fund to include Lifeline rates
Exactly,
for our
so
people.
10 years
Because
from
this
now,
is
you-
about
you-
our people.
So 10 years from now, you find money to increase recycling efforts because we filled up the landfill.
Could I just interject?
Yeah.
Just one last thing. The Guam Solid Waste Authority today has issued and issues recycling carts. So those are the carts with the green bins, and there is a cost to that.
Mm-hmm.
That cost was never factored in to any rate plan, any rate structure that the receiver submitted to the court. And the receiver continues to compare the cost of that recycling to the tipping fee of the Ladson landfill, which to me is comparing apples and oranges. And every time I bring it up, they look at me funny. But anyways, the cost to actually put trash into the landfill, the actual cost. When I say cost, it's like there's a ton. We pay private companies to haul the trash there. We pay private companies to manage the landfill itself. So there is an annual cost to it. And the cost to it is probably on the order of about $50 or $60 a ton, right? We charge 170, or and then from that margin you have to pay this, that, and the other. The cost to I say $50, $60 a ton. That's not. You won't find that anywhere in a receiver report, because he doesn't report that cost per ton. He compares the cost of recycling, how much the cost per ton of recycling, and he comes up to about $130 to recycle. That's the cost that the Solid Waste Authority pays for recycling. That's per ton. And he compares it to $170 tipping fee, which is what we charge for picking up a ton of trash. So in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, the Solid Waste Authority has been shouldering the burden for recycling. It has an added. The receiver implemented it. And what you can make arguments whether it's good for the community or not. That's neither here nor there. I'm not here to argue one way or the other, but I'm just saying he's already implemented it, and there is a cost that the Solid Waste Authority is. So to your point, Senator Respicio, I would, if any part of the Resolving Recycling Fund were to go to the Solid Waste Authority to help in anything, I justify that in my mind as like, look, we are doing recycling. The Solid Waste Authority has been doing recycling. There are bins out there, and we just need to increase that participation to fulfill the mandate of it. I don't think anybody here is going to argue that recycling is good, right? Because it diverts the trash and it's good for the environment. Senator Aguon wants to make sure that there's no illegal dumping and that we can make it more affordable. I completely agree. I love to do that too, and I want to make sure it's all affordable. So I'm just saying here that that we're all in violent agreement, right?
We are,
right? It's just there's just different ways that we're looking at it. So again, I agree with Bob here. Like, let's sit down. We can talk about this. We can look at it from our perspective and from your perspective, and I'm sure we could help move this forward. Again, that's all I have to say.
Okay, hopefully we could do that sooner than later, because I'd like this to be addressed as well. Okay, so if there's no other questions for this panel, thank you for your participation this morning. We have one more who signed up to testify. Thank you. We have one more. Wait, yeah. Okay, we have one more who signed up to testify, and I would like to give him as much time as he needs as well. Mr. Wayne Ujoa, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. Also like to thank the rest of the panel, Senator Ada, Senator Morrison, Senator Torres, Senator Aguon. I'm here today on my own personal capacity, and with regards to my personal capacity, the interests of this particular bill affects me, and in more ways than one. I'm a family man. I'm here on a residential capacity, as well as neighbors who couldn't be here today. I'd like to represent them. The reason I'm bringing what I have to say here today is this bill that you guys are introducing is obvious to almost anybody that's in this arena or anybody who has knowledge of solid waste that it's for the people, the common folks. I'm that common folk. I'm a recipient of government assistance program. I qualify for that. So this bill affects me in that way. Another way this bill affects me is that since I've been back on the island since 2007, I've never subscribed to a waste collection service because, for one, it just wasn't in our thing. We took care of our trash. I was raised the old ways, and then as the system came in, I've learned to use that, and then moving to the States, I learned how it works. So in coming back here, I found out that it's more affordable for a person of my income status to take it to the residential transfer station myself and dispose of it, okay? And you get more than your money's worth doing that. Coincidentally enough, I saw this bill on Monday of this week, but prior to that, the week before, I was working on legislation that I wanted to introduce to the legislature for help. I also own a small business operating collecting residential trash. Since 2011, I established that business. I've provided the services to many different folks, including few people here in the legislature who've called upon my services. And you have that brochure there before you. If you read that closely, somewhere there you'll see, along with the price lines, it says bags. I have now upgraded my services to where I provide you with a qualified waste container. Okay, and it's compatible with the GSWA's own waste container. And I've got different sizes there that almost meet your tier. And there's the legislation that I want to introduce. I don't want to go into too much details right now. It's not finished. I want to finish it. But without giving away too much, this has been established since 2011. And there's a reason for that. It's location. I'm a regional waste hauler, residential only. Okay, and it all just started out as me taking my trash, my parents' trash, and then as this program came in and people couldn't afford it, neighbor asked, "Can you take mine? I don't have a truck. Can you help me out? I don't need that big container. You know, it's too bulky for me to move." Or a retired old military guy making a life at EPAN, who's the one who said, "Somebody needs to do this." That's what inspired me. And it was to provide a service to the complaints of the people who said it cost me too much. The container's too big for me to haul around. I don't even accumulate that much. I've paid into the service and I accumulated that much. So the route drivers come around and see that I don't make that much, so they just pass me by until 2-3 weeks later, and then decide to pick me up because they don't make that much trash. Without going into too much detail there, I'll wait until that's done. I fully support this because it's directed to the people who need help. This is what they're talking about. This is the people who elected you guys here to help them, because your decisions, your choices you make are in their best interests. Now, how you guys, as they said earlier, the details of how the money's going to be funded, what you're going to name it and all that is all in you guys' hands. The things I would like to throw into your making these decisions is, one is the mechanism of management for qualifying program. You have all these federal programs already that are going through, and this is just my own opinion, going through public health, and they evaluate a person's income. They get all that information already and find out whether they qualify for other substantial government income, whether it's food stamps or welfare or lowered power rates. Try and keep it all in one, disseminate it out to the others. That's what I'm going to say about that. If public health creates a named fund and Wayne Ujoa qualifies for that lowered rates in the power section or in the GSWA section, this is how much he should be getting. So that money gets disseminated from one agency to the next. And I understand that sometimes the hoops, it takes time to get there. Now, the other concern I have is because I am a small business owner, I'm worried about rates on my end because I am charged the commercial rate going up. And I'm wondering how it may affect me, and I understand now, just listening to this panel, that it's the PUC that decides that. Okay, so I'm going to cross that off my... With regards to the waste receptacles, people paying into getting a waste receptacle, you don't have it there, but on my contract agreement, I have a customer acknowledgement contract agreement service terms. With regards to that, what it is I illustrate that the container belongs to me. I purchased it brand new and I bring it to you brand new. It has my labelings of my containers on it, my information, and I say to you, it's in your custody now. Full care. So meaning you must take care of it in the way I would take care of it. If there's any damages or loss of it, it fully becomes your responsibility. You now owe me and you agree to pay that back. It's on that contract, you sign it. So I'm not asking any more money from you because I know you're already having trouble just trying to pay the services. That's one way I resolve the other issue. And this is all just me trying to help the people only in my district. I don't want to become island-wide. It's not, I operate with a pickup truck. You guys know, some of you know this. Just a pickup truck or even sometimes a Jeep and a trailer. That's how I do a business. And it is licensed and I have a hauler's permit. Okay. The other thing that you might want to take into consideration is the improvement and the effectiveness of a recycling program. You know, I remember back in the days, and some of you might remember this, that, you know, at our ranch or our private areas, we would collect aluminum cans from anywhere, and I was always told to put it on the path where the car drives, because we have to smash it, because when we put it in the trash bags, it weighs more and it's more valuable. Those were the days when you can bring a pickup load of trash to the aluminum cans to the recycling center, and $1 would go a lot further. You can buy 3 hot dogs probably for $1. You know, pack of cigarettes back then were 50 cents. I'm not saying that it's good for you, but just to give everyone an idea. Today, you could take 2 giant loads of what I collect, aluminum cans, and you'll come out with $50. It's not even enough to pay my son who does it. You know, the game's just a regular Xbox game. If any of you here are gamers, you know, the technology itself, what you call a refurbished game that's been turned in, costs more than that $50. 2 loads of trucks, and they're talking about months of collection. You know, and I'm talking about a son who was 16 years old, who's now 18, graduated, he's got his own job, and he still helps his father do this because we still have problems with making ends meet. You know, I'm a family of 6. So I think the answer to that is, let's look at what's been working for the rest of the world, maybe mirror what programs have been working out there and try and apply it here. You know, like with anything, you have your time here in the legislature, there will be those who come up behind you. And a lot of them are going to look to the past of what you've done to find out what worked and maybe can work for them in the future. Because we're here about their future. And that's what I think this bill is introducing. And all the same, you guys might have differences on the way it's named, how money is moved around, but all in all, your intent and of what you're trying to do is all for the best of the future of this island. The other thing that this is where I think you really need to put into the bill is you have family members out there who are small, 2 house members only, retired, veteran, maybe not even from this island, just visited Guam, want to make Guam their home because they like the weather. Okay, then you have families who are government employees who've worked all their lives and are both retired. They don't meet this qualifying income bracket, but there's only 2 of them. They still feel that that big container is not worthy of them having. So that's where I came up with that. There are small containers out there. There are. And that's maybe something you want. I know it might be taking away from my business because you're trying to retain GWA's client base. It's fine because that's the reason why I came up. It's for the people, not for me. I'm not trying to get rich off this program. I don't care about doing island-wide. I'm just trying to take care of the people in my neighborhood who are complaining who come to me. And this is the answer I got. But unfortunately, I only can do so much. Okay, so that's the other thing. One of the final thing, and I'm going to close with this, is I believe that if I was to get any groceries from Payless or whatever supermarket store, or if I was to get gas from a gas station, that just because we know each other, you know, you're not going to give me any special favors of meaning I'm not going to pay for it, right? Now, this has been brought to my attention, and it's kind of a sensitive thing for me to bring up. At this time, I don't even want to give details to it, and I won't. I'm just going to say that if you're being provided a service, you need to pay for that service. So that's something else that needs to be looked into. And if you can research GSWA's records, because everybody who dumps, no matter whether you're government, you're private, or you're residential, there is a tracking system that they have, and it's from their receipts. With those receipts, if you go back since 2011, when the program was implemented, to current, break down through all your different customer base, whether they're private and all the different private entities, government, all the different government entities that are allowed to collect trash, and residents, and all those residents that collect trash and dump themselves. Look at the records of where they increase, where they decrease on a graph chart. I'm not a businessman and I'm not a legislative man. I'm just learning all this because things are thrown in my face. I can't do this, I have to do that, you need to know about this. So I'm researching all this stuff just so that I can be compliant and legal with whatever it is I do. So with that being said, Senators, I leave you with that to ponder over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joel, for your participation. Any questions? There's no questions. Again, thank you. Okay, so we've exhausted the sign-up sheet for those wishing to testify on Bill 396. This bill's will be considered and deemed publicly heard, and so we're adjourned. Thank you.